In this video, I'm going to show you how to place the transmission oil pan on this Ram 2500. This one is serviceable, a lot easier. It has a drain plug, so let's get started. Our old transmission pan does not have a drain plug, unfortunately, so the only way to drain the fluid is to remove the pan directly and, well, just have a large pan underneath to catch all the fluid. Having said that, I'm going to start by unbolting the bolts. I will leave a few on just so the pan doesn't fall down, but I'm going to start at the front, work my way towards the sides, and I'll leave the rear bolts on, but not tight, so I can lean the pan forward and drain as much of the fluid as I can before I take it down completely. These are all 8mm in size, so let's take them all out. I'm going to start a couple of the bolts back here, just about halfway, one on each side. Considering this pan is leaking severely already, I'm not concerned about it coming off. It has already started to leak more at the back, so the seal is partially broken, but I do still have to pry it. Careful, because, well, it's full. Taking out the last two bolts here that I put in by hand, then we can completely drop this pan down. There it goes. Now we need to clean the surface where the gasket will sit, or if you don't have a gasket, like in my case, I'm going to use RTV, but it does need to be clean. I'm also going to wipe all of this so it stops dripping on me. Whatever you're using to wipe, make sure it's lint-free. It's not going to leave residue behind, and obviously make sure it's clean so it doesn't leave debris behind. Once everything gets wiped down, I'm going to take a razor blade, scrape off any of the remaining gasket that's here, and then I'm going to apply some new RTV, but of course I do have to degrease it first because you can't put RTV on oil. If you have a gasket scraper like this, you can use that as well, or a razor blade. Don't use sandpaper or anything that will gouge it or scrape it, because what happens if you do that is it'll cause little channels in here and those will not seal up, and that'll cause a leak. That's looking good. Let's degrease it and get it ready for RTV. Take a clean rag with brake parts cleaner on it, wipe the entire surface. Just as a side note, never spray parts cleaner directly on the valve body of the transmission or in the filter housing or anything like that. Just leave it as is. I know it's going to keep dripping and it's annoying, but leave it. With the oil pan on the workbench, I'm going to take a clean paper towel with some brake parts cleaner on it, and I'm going to degrease the entire area where I'm going to put RTV. Just in case I put any oils on here, fingerprints, or there's any debris in the way. Now, take your RTV and lay a thin bead all the way around. If any areas are not even them out with a clean gloved finger. Now let's bring this over to the truck and set it up on the transmission before the RTV cures. With this same clean paper towel that I used earlier, I'm going to go around one more time and make sure that there's no oil on the surface where the RTV will mount. There is oil back there, so I'll keep that in mind. I'm going to have to go quick. If you do put RTV where there is oil, it will not seal up and you'll have a leak. Bring the oil pan in, have your bolts ready, line it up the best you can. Set it on here and start some of your bolts just by hand so it can hold the pan on. Try to move it as little as possible. If you put two opposite bolts in, that'll not just line it up with all the rest of the bolt holes, but it will hold it flat. Don't tighten them much yet. Just put them in by hand until they bottom out. Now I'm going to go around with a very small ratchet and just make sure that they're all just as tight. Okay, I mainly just went by feel on this. I just wanted it to be squished up a little bit so that RTV can set and start curing. I'm going to give it about 10 minutes and then I will come back and torque all of these. That way the RTV has time to cure a little bit. Enough time has passed. The torque for this is 105 inch-pounds. So let's torque them all in a cross pattern. Doesn't matter where you start, as long as you go in a cross pattern to seat everything evenly. All right, that's all of them. Now I'm going to go around in a circle and just double check all of them. Because this pan comes with a drain plug, I'm going to make sure it's tight. It should be, but you always want to double check, and it is. So at this point, let's go fill it. Towards the passenger side of your engine, behind your intake tubing here, you'll see this yellow dipstick. This is for your transmission fluid. We're going to have to remove this in order to put a funnel in the tube and fill the transmission through here. Get a long pointy funnel, stick it into the dipstick tube, and start filling. Don't go too fast or it will overflow. You need to let the breather tube do its thing and let air out while fluid's going in. This vehicle takes ATF plus 4 transmission fluid, so make sure you have the right type. There were 3 transmission types offered for these vehicles. A 4-speed, which will take 4 quarts to refill, a 5-speed, which will take 6.6 quarts if it's 4-wheel drive, or 5.5 if it's rear-wheel drive. These numbers also apply to the 6-speed, so a 6-speed 4-wheel drive, 6.6 quarts to refill, and 6-speed rear-wheel drive, 5.5 quarts to refill. I have a 5-speed 4-wheel drive, so 6.6 quarts it is. I'm on my last quart. Out of this one, I'm only going to put about half of it. So basically just a little over half because it's 0.6. Right about there. Now, of course, we will run it and measure it and make sure it's good, but 6.6 quarts is what you want to start with. Remove your funnel. Now you have to check the transmission fluid level. You can see on the dipstick there's a cold fill mark and a hot fill mark. Cold is about 70 degrees, hot is about 180, or basically operating temperature of the transmission. Now you do have to have the truck running in park or neutral, but preferably park for safety. Apply the parking brake and make sure you're on flat level ground. Let the transmission run for at least a minute if you're going to check it when it's cold. That way the fluid can go through the torque converter and all of the solenoids in the valve body. So at this point, I'm going to dip it in and check it. I know my engine isn't running currently, but I just wanted to show you what it should look like. Dip it all the way down, pull it back out. Mine will look like it's severely overfilled because the engine is not running, and when it's not running, all of the oil is in the oil pan. But as you can see, it's red all the way up to here. If yours was hot and running, it would be here. If it's cold and running, it should be here. If it's not even on the dipstick, then you need to add more. If it's way overfilled when it's cold, then you need to drain some. And of course the same, if it's hot and it's overfilled, then you need to drain some. Make sure you're within the 2 dots here. If it's overfilled or underfilled, it can cause damage. Having said that, I'm gonna dip this back in. Job is done. At this point, you would want to take it for a road test and make sure it shifts properly.
When only the best will do, demand TRQ. The only company that lets you view before you do. TRQ is committed to offering the highest quality aftermarket auto parts that are engineered for peace of mind. Thanks for using and viewing with TRQ.